Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2014 Ford Fiesta, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster Crossbar-Style baseplate kit with removable arms. So there's going to be a total of 5 main components that needed to flat tow your Fiesta down the road. The first one's going to be your baseplate. So baseplate is going to provide us with a safe and reliable connection point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. That tow bar is going to be the second component. This is actually going to be the physical link that's connecting the front of your Fiesta to the back of your motorhome. The third component is going to be safety cables. And these are there in the unlikely event of a disconnect. These are going to keep the Fiesta attached to your motorhome. The fourth component is going to be tow bar wiring. What this wiring is going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Fiesta, keeping you not only safe but legal as well. And last but not least, the fifth component is going to be a braking system. And this braking system is going to apply the brakes inside of your Fiesta whenever you apply the brakes in your motorhome. And so that's going to bring you to a more safe and predictable stop, and not to mention create less wear and tear on your motorhome, since it won't be solely responsible for not only stopping itself, but your Fiesta as well. And there's one other thing too, which you don't have to pick up, but I would suggest, is a battery disconnect. Our Fiesta does require us to disconnect the battery whenever we want to flat tow it. And so what that battery disconnect is going to do is allow us to disconnect it simply by pushing a button, as opposed to getting under the hood every time, getting your tools out, and taking everything apart. So the first thing I notice about the base plate when we're not hooked up or anything is the way it's going to look. And it does a pretty good job of blending in, actually. It doesn't really stick out like a sore thumb. So this is how it'll be whenever you're just cruising around town, driving, and not hooked up to your motorhome. So that's really good. The base plate openings here sit pretty much flush with the bumper, so they're not going to be sticking out a whole bunch or anything like that. And same thing with the safety chain hooks. They do come out a little bit, but again, they do a pretty good job of blending in. I do like the fact that the base plate has a bracket attached to it already, and that's for your wiring connector there. So real convenient. One less thing you got to worry about kind of making work. It's already there for you, so it's real easy to set up. And I will say too, I do like how they kind of spaced everything out a little bit. Everything has a little bit of room, and that's going to make it really easy to hook up and disconnect, and it's not going to be cluttered. So this base plate does have these removable arms, and so whenever you are ready to hook up, you're going to have to pop these in. So really not a huge deal. All you're going to do, simply slide it into the base plate and rotate it about a quarter turn until our pin locks into position. And it's going to work the same for the arm on the other side as well. So I will say this is a crossbar style base plate, and so what that means is there's going to be a crossbar that runs from one side to the other here. Now that crossbar is not included with the base plate, but the majority of Roadmaster tow bars come included with it. So really not a huge deal, especially if you're picking up a new tow bar. You're going to have what you need there. If you already have a tow bar and you don't have a crossbar, say a different brand of tow bar for example, the good news is you can pick up that crossbar individually here at etrailer, and that'll allow it to pair up with your current tow bar. But with that being said, let me go ahead and put our crossbar on now, and that way we can have a better idea of what we're looking at. So this is what the crossbar is going to look like. These little brackets will just bolt to your removable arms. Then the crossbar itself just slides right in and gets connected by a couple of clips. So really not a big deal. Really don't take any more time or is any more difficult. But honestly, I think the crossbar style base plate does have an advantage, especially on cars that ride low to the ground like the Fiesta here. And that's because using that crossbar is going to raise that attachment point up another few inches off the ground. And typically your motorhomes ride higher. So by raising this up higher off the ground, it's going to help your tow bar sit more level to your motorhome. So I went ahead and hooked up our components here like we're getting ready to flat toe, other than one end of our safety cable and one side of our tow bar. And this is just to show you how easy it is to use the base plate and get it set up. Safety cable, just going to get clipped into the base plate there. And then we're going to take our tow bar arm, line it up, take our pin, that just slides right through. Then we take our keeper, slide it into place, and fold it down. And that's all there is to it to get the tow bar hooked up to the base plate. So at the end of the day, a base plate you really can't go wrong with. It's going to look pretty good whenever you're not using it. It's going to bring our attachment points a little bit higher off the ground because of the crossbar style. And it's just going to give you that peace of mind knowing that we have a reliable and solid connection point. Now, as far as the installation goes, it is going to take you a little bit of time. It is somewhat involved. You have to remove the fascia, and some parts can be a little tricky getting all the hardware lined up, but as long as you stay patient, you should have no problem getting it done. But with that being said, let's go ahead and pull it in the shop and do that together now. To begin our install, we're going to be working here at the front of our Fiesta. So we're going to pop the hood, and we're going to need to remove some fasteners here holding on the radiator cover. So there's going to be a total of 4 along this edge. The way these are going to work is you're going to take a Phillips screwdriver and back the screw out and pull the fastener out. I'll do the same thing for the other 3. Now sometimes what can happen too is when you pull that screw out, the fastener will kind of get stuck in there, the bottom part. If that's the case, you can just take a flathead and kind of pry underneath the head to get it completely removed. Now we can go ahead and remove our headlights. So we're going to have 2 fasteners. I'm going to use a T30 Torx bit to remove them. Pull that one out. And if we move to the very end, we're going to have another one way back here. So once we have them out, we should be able to wiggle our headlight around. Back here, you may have to kind of pull up on that to release it. Kind of just work it out. We're just going to completely disconnect the headlight. So there's an electrical connector here. If you push down on that center tab, you can pull it out. I'll set this light to the side and repeat the same process on the other side of our Fiesta. So now if we move over to our wheel wells, we're going to have 2 T25 Torx bit screws, and we'll pull those out. It does help to kind of turn your wheel to give you a little more room here. Get that one out and get this one removed as well. And once I have this one out, I'm also going to repeat this process over on the other side. Underneath the front edge of our bumper, we're going to have 5 7mm bolts. So 1, 2, 1 in the center, and 2 on the other side. So grab my socket and pull those out. So if we look right here where our front fascia meets up with our quarter panel, in this opening, there's going to be 3 8mm bolts that we're going to have to pull out. So it does help if you're coming in from the top like this to get an extension and a small swivel. Makes it a little easier to get them pulled out of there. That last one removed, I'll repeat the same process on the other side. Now with an extra set of hands, we can remove our front fascia. So what you're going to do is kind of pull down a little bit and out. We'll move it away from the vehicle a little ways. And if you do have fog lights on your Fiesta, you're going to disconnect them, push in this tab, and separate the two. So from there we can kind of work it off the front of our vehicle and set it off to the side. We're going to have to remove this little plastic shroud. We're going to have two fasteners holding it in, one right here. These are the same as our radiator cover that we did earlier. So you just loosen them up and pop them out. Same thing for this one right here. Then we just pull this off, set it to the side as we will not be reinstalling it. If we move up a little bit, we're going to have a sensor that we need to take off. So there's going to be a 10mm nut. We can remove that. Slide it off. Just let it kind of hang for now. Then we're going to repeat those same processes over on the other side of our vehicle. Over here on the driver's side, right here, this is the ambient air temperature sensor. We're going to have to remove it. So you can take a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver and just pry underneath it. It'll pop off. We can kind of just let it hang for now. On the passenger side here, you can see these are our horns. We're going to disconnect them, push down on the tab in the center, pull it away. And then we're just going to loosen up some of our wiring harness. So you can see that harness runs up here. There's going to be a few fasteners kind of holding it down. Just got to kind of pry behind those, pop them out, and then we can kind of work. Kind of work that wiring off to the side of our vehicle so it's out of the way. Over here on the driver's side, I removed that wire going across through here just like we did on the passenger side. If you look here at this plastic air dam, this small piece, we're going to remove that from each side. It's going to be held in place by two plastic fasteners. So we'll remove those just like we did all the other ones. Once you get these popped out, you're able to take that little piece and set it to the side. Here in the center of our vehicle, we're going to have this little bracket that connects to our bumper beam. We're going to remove the bolt that's holding it down. You can do that using a 10mm. Now if you look right here and right here, those are going to be some bolts we need to remove. So I'll use a 8mm socket to pull them out. Once I have both of them pulled out, we'll do this over on the other side as well. Now eventually we are going to remove this whole assembly here, and this acts as a core support which kind of helps keep our radiator and everything up and together. So I do suggest taking a jack and placing it underneath there, just lightly applying some pressure. That way it kind of has a little extra support while we have this removed. So now we're going to have a total of 5 bolts we need to remove on each side here. So one will be a 10mm up top. Pull that out first. Then we're going to have a total of 4 more along through here. So 2 on bottom, 2 on top. Use a 13mm socket to get these out. Now I already went ahead and removed the other side, so when you take this last one out, that should allow our bumper cord here to kind of come out of position. We'll sneak it out, and we're going to go over to the workbench and set this down. So now we can work on our bumper cord itself. So you want to be sure to flip it over, and we're going to be working on the bottom side of it. So we have it in the correct position now, and on each end we're going to have these 2 holes. Now what we need to do is enlarge them just big enough that we can take one of our bolts and be able to kind of easily pass it through. So they're just a little too small now, so I'll go ahead and open them up. Kind of see if it fits. So that's about right where we want it. Same thing with that one. So we know we're good there. Now I'll just simply do this on the other side of our bumper core. So with those holes enlarged, we can now take our base plate and just kind of set it in position. And you can see that the two holes in the base plate line up with the holes that we enlarged. So on this inside hole here, what we're going to do is take one of our bolts and a split lock washer, slide that washer over. We're going to take some red Loctite and put it on the threads of the bolt. And I want to mention any hardware that we use to secure our base plate from this point on is going to receive some of this Loctite. We're going to take that bolt and drop it down through this hole here. Now we can move to this end of our bumper beam. So if you look inside of the opening there, you can see where that bolt passed through. So what I'm going to do is take this nut plate, I'm going to reach inside of there and get the bolt threaded into it hand tight. Get it going. So once you have it started, that's what it's going to look like. And I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side. Now here in the center, what we can do is take a Fishwire. We're going to take the coiled end of it, run it through that hole. We're going to push it out, and eventually it'll come out of the side of our bumper beam here. Once we have it out, we're going to take the spacer block like this. It has a square in the middle. Slide it over that Fishwire. And we're going to take our carriage bolt. And the carriage bolt will thread onto the pull wire. So you have it threaded on. I like to just kind of push that together like so. And we can feed that hardware into the bumper beam and pull on the other end of our Fishwire. And what we're trying to do is get that bolt to pass out like that. And I do suggest, this makes it a lot easier if you take a small flathead screwdriver, kind of push it against the threads of the bolt to keep it in place, because we don't want that bolt to fall back into the frame. So I'll get rid of the pull wire by unthreading it. Put my Loctite on. We're going to put on a split lock washer and a hex nut. So I'll get that hand tight and do the same thing for the other side of it. Now what we can do is just snug down all the hardware that we have installed so far. If these end ones want to spin on you, what you can do is take a 3/4 inch wrench and put it inside of here to hold that nut plate steady. So now on the side here, you can see we have a hole in our base plate, but not a hole in our bumper core. What we're going to do is use the base plate as a template to drill a hole through that bumper core. I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Now we could take this brace and get it installed. Now pay attention, these are side specific, so make sure to check your instructional diagram to make sure you have the correct one. But the way this is going to work, this end is going to slide into our bumper tube, and this hole is going to line up with this one, and that one is going to line up with this one that we just drilled. So we'll take it, slide it in, and we're going to take a bolt and a split lock washer, Don't forget to put your Loctite on there. We're just going to get one started hand tight. Same hardware up here. Get that one started hand tight. Kind of run these down as much as I can with my hands. And once we have it in position, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So now we can take our whole assembly and slide it back into position. And it helps get one side going at a time. So once you have our assembly back in, we're just going to take our factory hardware and just loosely secure it on both sides. Now that we have everything lined up, we can work on our hardware that goes in the side of our frame. So that bracket that we put on that slid into our frame, one of the threaded holes is going to line up with a factory hole here on the side. Now I will say sometimes they don't line up perfectly, they can be a little bit off, so you may need to take a hand file or something and just create a little more space for you. And what I found too, since we left everything for the most part pretty loose, you can kind of maneuver that bracket inside of there a little bit. And take a flathead and kind of just pry down, and you can see when I do that it lines up even better. So the hardware we're going to use, we're going to take a bolt, split lock washer, the Loctite on there, and also one of these square plates. So that'll slide over, get that lined up, and start it hand tight. Then on the bottom side of the frame rail right here, there's also going to be another hole, and so we're going to use that same hardware combination, bolt, split lock washer, and this spacer plate, and just get this going as well. Once I have this one hand tight, I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side. Now what we can do is tighten down the 4 bolts on each side, holding our bumper beam to the frame. We can come back and take our 10mm bolt and reinstall it here on the top portion. We'll snug this down and do it on the other side as well. At this point, we can go ahead and snug down the rest of our hardware. Now we can go ahead and torque down all of our hardware to the amount specified in our instructions. And what we're going to do is start towards the back of our vehicle and work our way to the front. So I went ahead and kind of buttoned everything up a little bit, reinstalled our bolts here and here that we're holding on the core support a little bit, put our sensors back on, plugged our ambient air temp sensor back in, kind of clipped the wiring back on, and put this bolt back in here in the center. Now I want to mention, you won't be able to reuse those plastic air dams that we removed that originally went here and kind of down here, and that's just because the base plate is going to be in the way, but that's completely okay. It's not going to hurt or harm anything. But with that being said, now would be a great time to install your other flat toe components, and that's because we're going to have all this room to work with our fascia still removed. It just makes life a lot easier, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. But if you already have those components installed, you would simply just reinstall the front fascia the same way that you removed it. So now what we can do is trim out our front fascia. That way our base plate and other components can pass through. So depending on your exact setup, this can be a little bit different according to each vehicle and how you have things mounted. In our case, I just held our front fascia up, and I think our best bet is just going to be to completely remove this inside portion here. It looks like we might be able to save one or two little pieces. However, I think it might look out of place and just give us a cleaner look if we completely remove the whole thing. So this is somewhat thin plastic. You could probably use a pair of snips, a Dremel tool, maybe a little handsaw or something like that. So you have a couple different choices as far as removing this material. I'm going to use a little air saw and get that removed. Now that we have our fascia trimmed out, we can reinstall it the opposite way that we removed it. Don't forget to plug your fog lights back in if your Fiesta is equipped, which I've done already. Then we can simply just line our fascia up and get it back into position. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Crossbar-Style baseplate kit with removable arms on our 2014 Ford Fiesta.